Hello, everyone. Today I will tell you the story of I Spit on Your Grave Too, a 2013 American revenge horror movie. This film follows the story of an ambitious model, Katie, who lives alone in New York. In an effort to update her modeling portfolio, she naively accepts an invitation to take new photos. However, this experience quickly turns into her worst nightmare of abuse, torture, and kidnapping. In the end, what happens? Does Katie take revenge on those who kidnapped her? Do they get their deserved punishment? Watch till the end to discover the mind-blowing truth. There will be spoilers ahead, so watch out and take care. At the beginning of the movie, we see Katie Carter, a Missouri native, working part-time in a restaurant in New York City. She meets her agent, Sharon, who advises her that in order to secure modeling work, she needs to update her portfolio. This update requires more money, but Katie decides to take the risk. Fortunately, on her way out, she notices a poster offering free photography and quickly jots down the phone number. Katie supports herself by working 2 jobs and lives in an apartment in the city center. Her next-door neighbor, Jason, is the only person she knows, and he helps her around the apartment. Desperate to advance her career, Katie carefully goes through her old folder and decides to contact the number from the advertisement. When Katie makes the call, a man instructs her to send her photos via email to a man named Ivan. Upon receiving a confirmation of the photo shoot schedule and location, she is overjoyed. The next day, Katie arrives at the given address. However, as soon as she enters, she notices a model in lingerie being photographed in the studio. Seeing the conditions inside, her excitement quickly fades away. Inside, Katie meets the photographic siblings Ivan, George, and Nicola for the first time. George openly expresses his curiosity and admiration for Katie, supported by his brother. Suddenly, Ivan pauses while photographing Katie and tells her that her photos are not looking great because of her attire. He then suggests that she should show more skin in the photos to make them look sexier. This makes her uncomfortable, and she leaves the building despite Ivan trying to convince her that showing skin is normal in their industry. 2 days later, George returns to Katie's apartment, giving her a flash drive containing her photos. She reluctantly accepts it but does not invite him in, as she feels uncomfortable around him. Later that evening, George looks through Katie's photos, which intensifies his feelings for her. At midnight, Katie is woken up by the sound of a camera shutter. To her shock, she finds George taking pictures of her from across the bed. In self-defense, she tasers George and rushes to the door, but he blocks her path. He takes Katie back to the room, hitting her head repeatedly until she collapses. Weak and helpless, Katie is tied up by George, who prepares for his evil plans. Jason, Katie's neighbor, hears her low screams and rushes down to check on her. When he enters the room, he is shocked by the horrifying scene in front of him. Suddenly, George appears from the corner and starts stabbing him. Katie watches in horror as Jason dies, while George forces himself onto her. After committing his unforgivable act, George realizes the severity of his crime and cries in a corner. He contacts his brother, confessing what he has done. Soon after, Nicola and Ivan arrive at Katie's apartment and find her crying in a corner. Without hesitation, they start cleaning up the evidence and force Katie to take ketamine, knocking her out. A few days later, Katie is found naked and tied up in a dilapidated basement. Nicola imposes himself on her, exploiting her vulnerability. However, when George sees Nicola forcing himself onto Katie, he stops him immediately. Hearing their argument, Ivan enters the basement and orders them to stop fighting. Before leaving, he instructs his brothers to go upstairs, leaving Katie alone for the night. The next day, Ivan pours a bucket of cold water on Katie to bathe her. She becomes hostile towards George, who tries to approach her. The other 2 brothers return and force more ketamine onto her. George approaches Katie again, this time gently wiping her skin. Soon after, Katie discovers a small window covered with a piece of cloth, which gives her hope of escape. Determined to stay sober, she forces herself to vomit out the ketamine. After a while, George returns to the basement and dresses her in a deep red dress. As he unhooks the handcuffs to fit the dress, Katie seizes the opportunity to escape. She slaps George with a bucket and, as he turns around, hits his head again. Katie then crawls out of the window to freedom. However, once outside, she finds herself in a strange city where no one is willing to help her. She notices signs and letters in different languages which shock and confuse her even more. Eventually, Katie spots a police officer and seeks his help. She is taken to a station where she meets a detective named Kirill who safely escorts her. To her disbelief, he informs her that she is in Bulgaria. Katie is stunned and unable to comprehend how she ended up there, as her last memory was being in New York. Subsequently, a lady named Anna Padoff, who works at a women's organization center, enters the room while Katie is being interrogated. She comforts Katie, telling her that she runs a shelter for women who have experienced similar hardships. However, Katie doubts her intentions and requests to be taken directly to the U.S. consulate. Anna urges her to take a bath before going to the consulate and drives Katie to her residence. After everything Katie has been through, the mansion's cozy interior provides her with a fleeting sense of peace and comfort. Anna kindly guides Katie downstairs, saying she has spare clothes for her. However, Katie is once again confronted with her worst fear. A familiar sense of danger creeps in before she fully realizes where she is. To her shock, Anna is the mother of the brothers who abducted her. Her kindness is just a facade, and she even slaps Katie before Ivan drags her back to the mattress. Later that night, Valko, a family friend, comes to see Katie. Not content with just calling her derogatory names, he begins bullying and threatening her. He then repeatedly electrocutes her, including her private parts, and forces himself on her. Upstairs, Anna plays loud music to drown out Katie's screams. After Valko leaves, Katie lies in the basement, sobbing and devoid of life. When Ivan visits Katie, she gathers all her strength to gently slap him. Angered by her defiance, he beats her viciously, leaving her battered and bruised. Katie later notices the brothers digging a hole in the basement. She has lost all her strength and cannot react to their plan to bury her alive. Before placing her in the box, Nicola tears off her skirt and tosses it to George. George places Katie's cross necklace inside before sealing the box and burying it underground. Despite being responsible for the chaos, George begins to regret his actions. Inside the box, Katie can only cry, unable to scream or move. Just when she believes this is her final resting place, the ground beneath her collapses, freeing her from the box. She stumbles into the sewer system below and, over time, slowly regains her health. Eventually, Katie finds a sewer opening leading to a local church, where she starts stealing food. She encounters the rector, Father Dimov, who finds her taking food from the pantry. Despite his offers, Katie refuses the food and declines to spend time with him. Respecting her wishes, he allows her to take food, clothes, and a Bible. The next day, Katie emerges from the sewer, heading toward the U.S. Embassy. However, as she nears the building, she decides to turn back. She later returns to the church, surprising Father Dimov. The priest, believing she is a victim of crime, offers his help and support. He suggests contacting the authorities, but Katie insists against it. As she leaves, Father Dimov finds an open page in the Bible she left behind, with the words, "Vengeance is mine," written on it. Determined to seek revenge, Katie begins planning her next move. Her first step is to steal money from Anna's residence to buy supplies and weapons. She successfully carries out the theft and moves on to her next scheme. Katie waits at a restaurant where George is dining and subtly places a drink on his table. A few minutes later, George drinks from it and finds Katie's cross pendant inside. Realizing she is still alive, George frantically searches for her. Katie quietly appears around the corner and lures him into the sewer. Once inside, she overpowers him and clutches his neck with both hands. Meanwhile, Father Dimov contacts Detective Kirill to inform him about Katie's situation and her intent for revenge. Kirill learns more about her from the priest and realizes that she has not received adequate protection. George wakes up in the sewer, bound and helpless, facing Katie's wrath. She inflicts multiple wounds on him and scatters feces on the injuries, causing severe infection. His screams of pain only provide Katie with a twisted sense of satisfaction. The next evening, Nicola goes to a bar where an unknown person places a drink on his table. After drinking it, he begins to feel numb and disoriented, realizing too late that it was spiked with illegal anesthetics. As he struggles to regain his senses, he notices Katie from across the room. However, his confusion prevents him from realizing if she is real or just a hallucination. He stumbles to the restroom, only to be confronted by Katie. She strikes him, smashing his head against the floor, and then drowns him in an unflushed toilet. Katie quietly walks out of the club after yet another successful act of revenge. The next morning, Valko arrives. At the church, Valko notices Katie hiding in a nearby corner. Without hesitation, he orders his family to go home immediately and pursues her. As Valko runs to the basement, Katie seizes the opportunity to strike him with a rock. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself tied to a bed frame and surrounded by metal cables. Katie begins his torment by electrocuting various parts of his body, including his private parts. Katie installs electrical wires onto the bed frame and turns the regulator to high voltage, ultimately killing Valko. His screams of pain echo through the house. Meanwhile, Anna returns home to find her house in disarray, with her belongings scattered all over the place. She is drawn to the basement by the sound of music. Suddenly, Katie appears from behind, pushing Anna into a pit and knocking her unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, Anna is horrified to see multiple wounds on George. Her face flushes with terror as she finds her son covered in blood. Before she can react, she screams in shock. At the same time, Ivan arrives home, surprised to find the house empty. The loud music draws him to the basement, where he investigates the source. To his horror, he discovers a hollow hole and ventures into the sewer, where he finds George locked to the wall. As Ivan tries to wake his brother, Katie strikes him on the head, knocking him down. When Ivan regains consciousness, he is tied to a table with Katie standing beside him. Before sealing the box, Katie removes George's gag to show him his brother's slow and painful demise. She then focuses on tormenting Ivan, using a system to inflict severe pain on his private area, making him experience the agony she endured. Just then, Kirill arrives and raises his gun at Katie. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ivan grabs Katie from behind and attempts to strangle her. However, Kirill shoots Ivan in the head, killing him instantly. This allows Katie to escape and finally regain her freedom. Meanwhile, Kirill arrests Anna for the crimes committed by her family. The film ends with Katie finally feeling satisfied with her revenge. Seeking safety, she heads to the U.S. Embassy, determined to start a new life.